Well, you guys clearly wanted it. So here we are, part 2, baby. And yes, this is part 2 of solving the Sin mystery. So make sure you check out that previous video first. But before we start, I just want to say thank you all again for all your support in the last video. Like seriously, you've all been so nice on giving me your thoughts and helping me shape this idea. So if you enjoyed this video as well, please like and subscribe, and let's continue to help the channel grow so that I may be able to create more content in the future. When I made the first Sin video, I just wanted to share my ideas and hope that some people would be interested. Well, interested you clearly are, so let's continue solving the mystery of who is Sin.
Okay.
I won't fall down, you need me. We'll follow grounds we won't bend me. I'm not down, believe me. We won't settle down, we'll make them move. This is my world, look at my reflective evolution. Follow you.
Before we begin, I just want to thank you all again for all the cool ideas you shared with me, which also made this video initially way longer than I wanted it to be. So I'll be splitting this part 2 into a part 2 and part 3. Not to worry, part 3 will come out pretty soon, as I've already recorded it. Alright, now we can get started. First off, I want to go over some new clues I found. To start, I want to go over some of the things and mistakes I made in the previous video that you guys have brought to my attention. First off, the code in Uzi's POV that I asked about. Shout out to Red Nightmare, Hey World 21, RC Wolf, and I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that. Thanks to your guys' support, we now know that this code is some sort of network code. What's more, the AI of this code is trying to overcome an error, and that error seems to be the AI needing to replace something that's been deleted. In the last video, I mentioned how I believe the Absolute Solver is some sort of server that connects all the users, with Sin as the main admin, and this code confirms and supports my idea that it's going haywire because Sin has been forcefully removed, sort of like how data can get corrupted if a connection is disconnected abruptly. I also forgot to mention that Doll was able to force her memories into V into episode 3, meaning not only that they are all connected, but they all, or at least the full solver users, can hack into each other. Another clue explaining how Uzi reverse callback ping. Okay, now to go over the things I got wrong. First off, Sin does actually use Uzi's tail when fighting Enenori, so she is capable of using the solver abilities of those she possesses. Next is the fact that Uzi had tentacles sticking out before she was revived by the blood/oil. This could mean that she has always had the potential to create tentacles, but didn't know how to, or that solver abilities are linked to the core. Not too sure which one. But she also had tentacles at the very last scene before the end credits, so I'm more inclined to believe that this was a result of eating the black hole core. And now for the biggest thing I missed. I mentioned how Uzi's UI stays hers the entire time, but actually, there are a couple frames where it flashes to Doll's UI, meaning Doll has become part of the core that Uzi ate, which makes sense because Sin ate Doll's core in the previous episode. So Doll may also now be a part of Uzi, just like Sin, and perhaps she's biding her time, waiting to take her revenge. Sin may have also gained Doll's ability to conjure, as this is the only explanation on how she got her sword back in the final battle. Seriously, how did she get it back? It should still be in the chapel, and it was nowhere to be seen the entire episode leading up to the fight. Speaking of our favorite Robo-Russian, NeoChats4 pointed out that Doll actually does manifest flesh, as you can see red flesh-like things in her bathroom with the mirrors. I'll admit, I was skeptical of this at first, but I still checked it out with an open mind, and sure enough, we do see red flesh-like roots in there. But then, I had an idea. So I went back to when Uzi awakened her solver, and I found the exact same red flesh roots in the cabin. Meaning, this could be a sign of the true solver, and perhaps this is where Doll awakened her solver. So I continued digging. We know that Doll has had her solver way longer than Uzi, but how much longer? Well, if we see the posters of Missing Drones episode 3, we can see they go as far back as January, and the most recent being in May, before the prom. So that means the Doll has had a fully awakened solver for at least 5 months. But we can go even further. We can see that Doll had at the very least early signs of solver infection when her parents died. Oh, but I'm not done. This is to go even further beyond. Nori in episode 7 already knew that Uzi and Doll inherited the solver.
Who's its host?
Like, Uzi? And a red-eyed,
Yeah, this kid, I know, dummy. Which one was just trying to eat us?
and Nori has been supposedly dead since Uzi was a neural network baby. We know this because Uzi doesn't remember anything about Nori.
How'd you know my mom? Was she cool? She didn't suck, did she?
So that means that both Doll and Uzi have been showing signs of solver infections since they were babies, or Nori and Yeva already knew that their children would inherit the solver. So why did they awaken at different times? More importantly, why did they both suddenly show signs of Sin's corruption at the same time? Doll is seen covering her Sin-infected eye in episode 5, and the rest of the show, episodes 6, 7, and 8, all take place on the same night. Meaning Uzi showing signs of Sin's corruption in episode 6 happened very closely to Doll's. So, what was the catalyst for their awakening? Well, it was coming into contact with the murder drones. Doll did witness her parents die in front of her, and Uzi has never met a murder drone till end in the pilot. Other possibilities of awakening can be witnessing murder or extreme stress, but those are all the similarities I can find between Doll and Uzi. Perhaps Sin is watching through the murder drones and they might have some sort of built-in nerve callback ping. As for why Sin was suddenly corrupting them at around the same time and not any time before the show, I have a couple ideas. Idea 1. The patch weakened Sin's ability to possess other Absolute Solver users, as Nori, despite being patched, still seems to be getting visions of Sin and her plans. But now Sin wasn't powerful enough to possess anyone with a strong enough will. Possibly a side effect of Nori being patched while Sin was piloting her. Like pulling out a USB mid-download. So, she played it safe and sent her favorite pets to eliminate any and all threats before coming down herself to finish the job. Idea 2. Sin didn't realize they didn't have the patch anymore, or even how she got kicked out in the first place. She didn't even know what the patch was till Doll told her.
Где фиксер, человек?
Not sure what you mean.
Избавиться от вычислителя. Где он?
So that's what they were doing down here, huh? Crucifix-looking thing.
Так ты не знаешь.
Had my suspicions. Thought they kept cutting my feed.
So maybe she didn't even bother trying to possess anyone as she was scared that she would just get patched out again. Idea 3. Sin can only possess fully awakened Absolute Solver users, but Doll was much more difficult due to Yeva having a full patch. But, once Uzi showed up, she had a new toy she can use to complete her plans. But wait, what does all of this have to do with Sin and the Solver being separate, and Sin being the one in control? A couple things. Sin has limits to her power. Seems like certain conditions must be met to awaken and corrupt the Solver user. Now, wait a minute, didn't you say that Sin was not the one awakening Solver users? Yes, and I still stand by that. But now, I'm more inclined to believe that Sin and the true Absolute Solver are working together. Sin set up Uzi to be emotionally vulnerable in episode 4 by scaring her with that flesh thing she made, and the Absolute Solver just went to work after that. Another thing, leaked memories. When Solver users link to each other, they seem to be able to share partial memories. As I stated earlier, Sin didn't even know about the patch, yet Nori knew about Sin sending the murder drones, and even somehow knew Sin's name.
Why is Sin after her own murder pet? You stupid or something?
Oh yeah.
This is either because that's what Cabin Fever Labs had on file, or she learned it from being possessed. And another thing, Sin being the one host and the fact she came down to Copper 9 herself. Why would an Eldritch being like the Absolute Solver have only one host body? And why risk sending that one host body to finish the job? And the nail in the coffin to this? All Absolute Solver users are referred to as hosts, as stated in Nori's picture. Which also states that Sin sent the murder drones to eliminate all other hosts. So the term host isn't used to refer to anyone that's currently housing the true Absolute Solver, but is more of a generalized term for anyone with an Absolute Solver. Meaning Sin is no more special than any of the other Absolute Solver users. Once again, reinforcing the idea that Sin doesn't want any other Absolute Solver host to get in her way. So Sin coming down to Copper 9 herself was personal. She wanted to finish off the job herself before consuming Copper 9. Okay, now to go over the new clues I found. Starting with our favorite Eternal Destroyer, V. So we find out V has been playing at both sides the entire show, trying to protect herself and N from Sin. But how much of that is actually true? A lot of these lines contradict one another.
V, we can't hurt Uzi.
Do our jobs, and that thing leaves us
Don't
alone.
know what you're talking about because you won't tell me.
New body, same horrors. Huh, Sin? Working with Sin? We were supposed to get away, Jay! You said we do our jobs on this planet, and it leaves us alone!
So, V wants to do her job, so Sin leaves him alone, yet is actively working against Sin, in the same scene no less. Something about this doesn't make sense to me. And this makes even less sense when you take this scene into account.
Jay, relay hand. Sin's orders.
Step 1. Clear drop zone of life and construct spire.
Now, I'm willing to accept that maybe V is more mad at the fact that Jay has formed a partnership with Sin, but that still doesn't explain why she suddenly tries to kill Uzi, who she called Sin. But that's not the only thing that's strange to me. V should know well that this is not enough to kill Doll. And yet, she just does one shot to the head and says, job done. What's even more confusing is her sudden turn on Uzi. V already saw that she had the solver in the previous episode, yet she only suddenly turns on her after she sees Uzi create this abomination. So in order to find out exactly what's going on with V, we need to find out what her job is and what it is. For starters, I do believe her job is to kill other solver users, as confirmed by Nori's notes. But I don't believe she was given the details of what a solver user actually is. As I said earlier, she completely failed at killing Doll, and didn't turn on Uzi till she created this thing. Meaning whatever Uzi did here met the requirements of V's job. Perhaps her job is to kill any drone that manifests as flesh, or any drone that has yellow lights. No other drone in the colony has yellow lights on them, so this is possible. What's more, her job may have been to assassinate Sin. She does call Uzi Sin in the next scene they're together, and I did say in the last video that any yellow possessed solver user is Sin, so this wouldn't surprise me. As for who gave her this job, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I was having so much trouble coming up with a satisfying answer that made sense, but one character saved this idea for me. So, I believe the one who hired V was the true absolute solver. Or so she thought. V here may have believed she was getting orders from the absolute solver, aka it, to kill any drone that has a yellow solver, and that those drones were being possessed by Sin. But in reality, it was actually Sin giving her the orders the entire time. I pointed out earlier that Tessa and Jay stated that the relay orders were coming from Sin, but I think this was actually a slip up that immediately made V suspicious. First off, Jay was the only one getting the relay orders, and most likely didn't tell N and V who they really were from, or even she didn't know at the time. She did say that she was tricked too. Plus, N and V's memories were altered,
The humans sent you without a communication relay and reformatted your memories to soup.
so they most likely didn't remember everything correctly. Second, the character that saved this idea, Lizzie. We see here on Lizzie's phone that she sent the J photo she took in episode 7 to V after V tamed Sparky. So that means V asked Lizzie to tell Jay during episode 6 before the trap laid by Doll. Meaning, something Sinessa and Jay did here made V suspicious. I'll admit, this is all a bit of a stretch, but it's the only thing that makes any sense. So please, thank Lizzie for making this idea possible.
Thank you, Lizzie!
Shut up, loser.
So when Sin says this to V in the finale,
Do your job and I leave you and N alone. Right, V?
I think she's taunting V, making fun of her for believing that she had any true escape from her master. Now, what does this all have to do with Sin actually being Sin, and not the absolute solver? Well, in the last video, I mentioned how Sin is competitive and doesn't want any absolute solver users, something the true absolute solver shouldn't mind. So, she tricked V and Jay into killing any drone that could potentially oppose her, without giving them full details of the absolute solver, so she can keep some secrets to herself. I also want to mention that commenter Jetty B brought up the idea that maybe Sin is jealous of other absolute solver users and is afraid that the true absolute solver may try to replace her. And honestly, I just love this idea. It reminds me so much of Toy Story, and this just might become a new headcanon. Speaking of Sin, for an antagonist who literally lurks the entire show, Sin actually only appears in 4 episodes. Or at least her voice does. And out of those 4, one of them stands out, and that's her first appearance in episode 2, Heartbeat. Why is it so strange? Well, this is the only episode where Sin, or whatever this thing is, refers to herself as we.
We're busy then anyway, so whatever. So lame. We are trying to repair that host as per our directive. More like you are our cute puppets. It hurts our feelings you don't remember us. Fair, but poor choice. Now we will have to do something shocking.
And then for the rest of the show, including this same episode, she refers to herself I, singular.
Time to go into my mouth now. I was using those. Honestly, I'm Starving, I see. You will not talk to me because I have hurt your feelings. Do your job and I leave you and N alone. Right, V?
So, what exactly is going on here? Well, I believe that LJ here isn't actually Sin. For one, this thing is more focused on its directive than anything. It's also not nearly as sadistic as Sin, and tends to be a bit more straight to the point. So, if it's not Sin, then it must be the Absolute Solver. After all, it's just following its directive. Something that Sin clearly has no interest in. Her only real goals in the show has been to consume planets and fuck with the rest of the cast. Another small detail here is how it completely ignores N. Like, there's not a single line of dialogue here between N and LJ. And we all know N is the only drone that Sin likes, so it's completely out of character for her to ignore him. We find another clue to this thing's possible identity in episode 5 in this scene.
Son of a... Come on. Solver of the absolute fabric. Get a grip.
Seeing this thing struggling to pick up the scalpel made me realize something. It can't use Absolute Solver telekinesis. It's the same case with LJ, as we see Doll crush the door to keep it out. So, if this thing was capable of using the Absolute Solver telekinesis, it would be able to easily open up the door and kill everyone in the room. Oh, one more thing to note. When this thing dies, 2 black hole cores spawn. One from the projector, which I can assume is the body, and one from the crab heart. So, with all these clues brought together, here's my interpretation of what's going on here. This is either the true Absolute Solver, Sin's raw Absolute Solver program running autopilot fixing J, or J's raw Absolute Solver program that could be an extension of Sin's, considering all the murder drones Absolute Solvers originate from hers. This thing is much simpler and more robotic than Sin and the rest of the cast. I believe when it refers to itself as we, and it says our cute puppets, it's referring to both the Absolute Solver and Sin working together. Before you say the we are part is referring to the hive mind, then why does it immediately refer to itself in singular in the next scene? Sin does like messing with everyone and sees them as her toys. If anything, I think this supports the idea that Sin and the Absolute Solver are 2 beings, and both are still alive. This might also be what Jay is talking about when she says there is no escape, even in death. Because, even if they die, Sin would just activate the auto-run solver, which would fix them right up. This would also explain why Jay's hardcore didn't have her personality. It was overridden by the auto-run solver. Perhaps this auto-run solver exists in all the murder drones, and is what we see in episode 5 in the basement. As for the 2 cores, I believe one may be Jay's core and the other being the Absolute Solver program, the same one Uzi ate, or an extension of Sin's Absolute Solver program. As usual, this is speculation. So yeah, that's another clue that supports the idea that Sin and the Absolute Solver are separate, and that Sin is the one in control. Or at least the Absolute Solver is letting her take the wheel. And that wraps up part 2. Sorry that this took so long, but you guys are all just so amazing, and I want to share with you all the cool ideas I came up with that would have never been possible without your guys' support. I'll try to get part 3 out much faster. I also need to work my 100 sub special. I am super late on that. Thanks for all your support, and I'll see you on the next video.